Hey, Brian Whitens filling in for Buck Lavasser. Turn on the answering machines, lock the doors, and close the schools. The UP firearm deer season is right around the corner, and I'm getting ready to head to camp. On tonight's show, I'll travel to the western UP to get the scoop on hunting whitetails in the Porcupine Mountains.
So hunters can rent these cabins, they can come in and they can venture out and do some true backcountry hunting here in the park.
We'll get the DNR's 2012 deer forecast and a trip to the gunsmith to find out the optimal way to clean a rifle.
These do not even need to be in your cleaning kit.
That's right here, right now on Discovering.
The secret streams that flow beneath the cliffs of colored stone, forests thick and healthy with birch and pine and oak, surrounded by the greatest lakes this world has ever known. The black bear's awesome presence as he roams the hills and fields, call of the timber wolf, the loon's lonesome trill, the eagle soaring high above, the trout lies deep and still. These are what I treasure, the only way I measure feelings that I have for this fine land. There is so much to discover when you're a long-time lover of northern Michigan.
We all enjoy hunting right here in the UP, but we've all talked about that big hunting trip to somewhere else. Maybe north to Canada or out west. If there's one thing I've learned about the UP, it's that everything we want is right here in our backyard. I traveled to the Porcupine Mountains in the western UP to find out if that whitetail trip could be right here in our own backyard.
There's lots of opportunities for hunting in the park. In fact, people often maybe don't know that the park is open to hunting, and the majority of the park is open to hunting, and people do come here to hunt popular game species or white-tailed deer, black bear, or ruffed grouse, but definitely the white-tailed deer is what appeals to a lot of people. Come here to do some deer hunting. We're sitting inside of one of our park rustic cabins right now. This is the Gitchagumi cabin. We've got 17 of these rustic cabins available to rent in the park, and there's also 4 yurts that are available to rent. So hunters can rent these cabins, they can come in and they can venture out and do some true backcountry hunting here in the park. The cabins are available by rent. They're $60 a night. It doesn't matter what size cabin you stay in. The cabin we're in right now is an 8-bunk cabin, but some of our cabins go all the way down to as many as just 2 bunks. So there's 2, 4, 6, and 8 bunk cabins available. As I said, they're all $60 a night plus an $8 reservation fee. With the exception of Gitchagumi, all of the cabins you have to hike into, so anywhere from 1 mile to as much as 4 miles to get in. And the cabins are rustic. They're equipped very simply. There's bunk beds with pads on the mattresses. There's cookware, there's a coffee pot, there's a wood stove, but the user of the cabin pretty much provides everything else. You bring your water, bring your light, you got to put up some firewood to keep you warm in here, and anything that you're going to consume, whether it be toilet paper or food, you want to bring all that stuff with you. The hunters who come here to the park often come here because there's unique opportunities here at the park. This is an area that you can't use your four-wheelers in the park, so that appeals to a lot of people. They like to come and venture out on foot and get into some of the backcountry areas. You often don't see any other hunters when you're out hunting around, and the hunters who tend to come here are quite adventurous. They do a lot of hunting by foot. They're out there. Maybe they'll sit for the first and last daylight hours of the hunt, and then the rest of the time during daylight hours they're spent. They're walking around, they're scouting, they're maybe cutting tracks of some bucks and following them through the woods. So there's a lot of really, really interesting opportunities here in the park, and definitely staying at one of these cabins is a nice way to go. Don't overlook the yurts that we have available in the park, especially the Little Union River yurt and the Lost Creek yurt. Yurts are maybe not quite as solid as what a cabin is. You've got a wood deck floor, and then you've got kind of a poly canvas material for the wall with some wood lattice work. But they're equipped pretty much the same as what our rustic cabins are. They sleep 4 people. They are insulated. They actually heat up better than our cabins do in the wintertime because they heat up really fast. And they're in some good areas for deer hunting, especially those 2 cabins that are the 2 yurts that I mentioned, the Little Union River yurt and the Lost Creek yurt, because they're kind of right on the transition line between some of the old growth forest and then some of the younger growth forest of the eastern end of the park. And they rent for the same price as what the rustic cabins do. They're all $60 a night. And also for hunters who maybe don't want to stay in a cabin, maybe they want to camp, there's also camping opportunity here in the park. Our campgrounds are all open through hunting season. Now, you can't hunt right outside of the modern campgrounds. They're both in safety zones for logical reasons. Those areas immediately adjacent are closed. But some of the smaller, the outpost campgrounds, which are on the either the eastern or the southern perimeter of the park, these are small little primitive campgrounds. They basically have a vault toilet. You provide your own water at these places, and those are also in some really good deer hunting areas. And in fact, I talked to a fellow just this year who's planning a trip up here. He's going to do a combination bow hunting for deer and bow hunting for black bear trip, and he was telling me that for many years he and his buddies have been going out west, going elk hunting, and they just can't afford to do that anymore. So what they're doing is they're going to set up their base camp at one of our outpost campgrounds, but they're also going to bring some of their spike camp equipment, and they're going to set up a spike camp on the interior of the park as well. Camping fees are $14 per night for groups of 1 to 4 people, and that's either at the primitive, the outpost camps, or also for a backcountry camp. So if you're thinking of doing a spike camp, then you need a backcountry camping permit, and that's the same price, $14 a night for groups of 1 to 4 people. Depending on which cabin you choose, the forest cover can be drastically different. The very eastern and the very northern portions of the park are second growth timber. Those areas have been logged either around the turn of the century or into the early 1950s, late 1940s. But many of the cabins are also in the old growth forest of the park. So if hunting the big timber is what you had in mind, then cabins like Greenstone Falls, Section 17, the Mirror Lake cabins, those are all surrounded by old growth forest. And those are in the interior portion of the park, which is the high ground interior of the park, but doesn't maybe have quite the dramatic relief as you would find maybe at like the Lake of the Clouds cabin. Lake of the Clouds, you're nestled right on the shore of Lake of the Clouds, but immediately north of you, you've got the escarpment ridge there, so there's a 300-foot precipice right out back that you got to climb up. So when you get up into some of the higher grounds of the park too, you tend to find more of the oak trees, so more acorns, a little bit more opportunity for food sources for animals like deer. And then some of the other parks, along the shoreline can really be a mixture of forest cover. At the mouth of the Big Carp River, there's 3 cabins there: the Big Carp 4 Lake Superior cabin and the Big Carp 6 cabin. You've got you got old growth forest right on the interior, but you can kind of have a transitional forest down near the shoreline. So yeah, and definitely if you're planning a trip a little further out, maybe for next year, plan on coming out here in the spring and in the summer, or even early fall of next year. Do some scouting, use the maps and stuff that we can provide you, and get out there and kind of check out the deer use patterns. Look for places you think that they're going to congregate, because their use patterns do change with the seasons here in the park. So it's kind of a great excuse to just get out and do some exploring, do some scouting year round. One thing that does appeal to a lot of the hunters also is the lack of hunting pressure here in the park, because you're not allowed to use four-wheelers and you often have to hike a long distance into some of your locations. Some of the areas in the park doesn't get a lot of hunting pressure. So whether it's, if the deer are getting a little bit older in those areas, or, maybe they're not getting pushed or is accustomed to people, you do get kind of a definite wilderness style hunting experience when you come hunt here in the park. Most of the hunters who are coming here, they're not sitting for long periods of time. They're venturing out on foot. They're venturing into areas where there's no trails and not seeing many other hunters, and kind of hunting the old school way, the old style of getting out and doing some deer hunting, which that really is what appeals to a lot of the hunters who come here. They can rent a simple little cabin like this with some of their buddies, and they can get out there on foot and maybe test some of their traditional woodsman skills, and really work hard to get an opportunity at a crack at a nice big buck. There's definitely opportunities for a lot of different types of adventurous hunts out here, even things that maybe you wouldn't even think about doing in Michigan, such as setting up a base camp and a spike camp in a more remote area and hiking in for a few days to hunt that area hard. So there is a lot of opportunity here in the park for hunters. There's no special rules for the hunting season, so there's no special permits or anything that you need to get in advance to hunt here in the park. All Michigan hunting rules and regulations apply here just like they would in state forest areas around. If you're thinking about planning a hunt here, whether it's this year or next year, one of the first steps would be to contact the park. Talk to park staff, and we can provide more information. One of the first things that we're going to ask is, what kind of an experience are you looking for? What is it that you want to see and do while you're here? And then we can help you to plan your trip. Maybe give you some suggested areas to go stay, or cabins to rent, and areas to maybe concentrate your hunting or scouting efforts in. So definitely contact the park at any time with any questions that you have about the process.
I paid a visit to the DNR's Norway field office for the 2012 deer forecast.
Looks like the deer season for 2012 is going to be pretty good. We've had 3 mild winters, relatively speaking, across much of the peninsula. So we haven't had a lot of losses from winter kill. We've had decent production of fawns. This year in particular, we had a lot of reports of high fawn crop, especially in the south central UP. Again, in Lake Superior watershed, it's been decent fawn recruitment, but it's still relatively slow. But hunters should expect to see more deer on the landscape. There should be more year-and-a-half-old bucks that survived last winter out there in the herd to be harvested this year. They should have pretty decent antler development. Last year we had very good antler development. I would expect that again this year, since we had no stress of a winter. Even though we had drought conditions in some areas of the UP, there still was enough nutritional forage out there for animals. One thing we were lacking this year was a soft mass crop. The apple crop was pretty absent across much of the region due to the early frosts. However, this fall there's been a tremendous acorn crop in some areas. It's spotty, of course, so hunters should be looking to key in on those areas where deer are going to be feeding for natural foods, acorns in particular. So if you're someplace where there's oaks, those would be good spots to look, because the deer are still heavily active in those areas. There should be plenty of opportunity for folks. It's just going to require them to do a little bit of scouting. In the south central UP, we're talking Delta, Menominee, Dickinson, South Iron counties. Those are pretty productive areas for deer in the UP, primarily because of agricultural influence. They have a lot of production of animals in that area. There's a higher deer numbers in those areas. Hunters will see more deer, especially fawns. More does are harvested in those areas. And there are actually still some antlerless tags available in some of those units. Hunters can go to the local license vendor to find out where tags are available. I know in Unit 55, which is Menominee County, that's the only unit that still has public land tags available, as well as private land antlerless tags available. There's lots of opportunity there. There's a lot of private land, so you have to knock on doors and get permission, but hunters shouldn't be afraid to do that. It's always good to try and make relationships with landowners and gain access to properties, but there still is enough CFA land and some state lands and federal lands that there's opportunity for hunters to go on public ownership and pursue deer. When you move up into the northern forested landscapes, deer numbers do drop off rather quickly in many areas. And as far as you get towards Lake Superior watershed, deer numbers are going to be much lower. It's not as productive of a landscape. In the far west end of the Upper Peninsula, we have some pretty big remote areas where hunters can go and traditionally hunt deer by stalk method, get on a track and go after them, like up in the Porcupines, the Wilderness State Park. That kind of country up in Ontonagon, Gogebi counties, in the end of the Keweenaw Peninsula. It's big country. There aren't very many deer, but when they do harvest deer, they generally harvest some very nice animals. And there's less hunters, so you have less chance of encountering other hunters if that's important to you. When you move into the eastern Upper Peninsula, deer numbers are pretty good along the US 2 corridor. I mean, a lot of deer move south or in that southern corridor of the Upper Peninsula. As winter progresses, they'll move more south. That's where a lot of the deer yards are at. It depends on when we have snow this year. That'll have a big influence on what happens with their deer herd when they start migrating. They move out of the high country and they move into the low country. And it varies depending on where you're at. If you're in the Porcupine Mountains, the deer actually move down towards the shoreline when we have high snowfall. In the Keweenaw, they move down towards the shoreline as well. And if you're in other places, in Menominee County, they don't move hardly at all. So it varies greatly. So that's where you have to do a little bit of research. You can talk to your local biologist. It's always a good thing to do, find out what's going on in your local area. But just do a little bit of local research, do a little bit of scouting. It's very important. And make sure you find a good, safe spot to hunt.
The accumulation of propellant residue, projectile particles, and environmental detritus can interfere with the mechanical function of your gun, contribute to mechanical wear, and promote oxidation and corrosion of the gun's components. Or put simply, keep your rifle clean. To find out the best way to do that, I met with Steve Williams of UP Hunters Gunsmithing in Powers.
In visiting with my customers, I've discovered that most of them don't know the proper method for bore cleaning, keeping their rifles or shotguns clean in the bore. A lot of people, most people think that you use a loop for putting your patches on your cleaning rod to clean your bore, but that does not do a good job. To do a bore properly, you need to use a jag, and there's a couple different styles of jags that you can use. In the shop here, I use these. That way you get some actual cleaning pressure applied to the bore, and it actually does some scrubbing for you instead of just kind of brushing lightly down the sides of the bore. With cleaning jags, it's critical that you use the proper size patch, and there are umpteen different sizes for each different caliber and gauge for shotguns. So you have to have the proper one for whatever the caliber of gun is that you're cleaning. There's many different cleaning solvents out there. They're all adequate, I guess. But choose the one that you like. Wet your patch. This style of jag is one that you roll the patch onto the jag. Whenever possible, you want to clean from the breech end so that you don't damage the crown of your rifle, because that's the very last thing that touches the bullet before it exits the barrel. You do not want to do any damage on that, so you want to, if at all possible, clean from the breech. Now you use an appropriately sized brush for the specific caliber that you're using. Pass the brush through 5 passes will give you 10 strokes of cleaning. Now with a clean patch and dry, repeat the process with a wet patch. Now with a clean patch. One more wet patch. Following that with a clean patch should get this particular rifle to where we need to be. Semi-autos you will most likely need to clean from the muzzle. Then in order to protect the crown from rubbing the side of the cleaning patch on it, you need to use an appropriately sized muzzle protector. And your rod passes through that, and then you don't damage your crown. For any of your firearms that you potentially might be out in the wet weather with, especially during deer season or during bird season too, you can catch yourself out in a rainstorm. You need to protect the outer surfaces of your firearm. I use a product called T9. It's a bow shield product that was originally developed by Boeing Aircraft and started its life as bicycle lubricant. There are a number of rust preventative products out there. But this has been tested on a number of occasions and has come out as the leading contender in rust preventatives. You want your patch fairly saturated. And then wipe down all the outer surfaces. Avoid getting it on your stock. It's easiest to do the barrels when it's out of the stock or removed from the receiver. Make sure you cover all surfaces. And you're leaving it on rather wet. Now set it aside overnight and let that dry. The following day, take a soft cloth, old t-shirts work well for it, and wipe off any excess. Don't scrub, but just wipe it down to get any excess oil off the outside. And now you're ready to reassemble your firearm and go out and hunt in the rain, in the mist, in the fog, whatever, and it will all beat up on there. When you come back in at the end of your hunt, just wipe it down with a soft cloth, disassemble it, and leave it air dry overnight, and you should not have any rust issues whatsoever with your firearm. As far as waterproofing and protecting your woods on your shotgun or your rifle, any good furniture polish. Apply it, leave it dry, buff it off, and that will protect the wood finish on your firearm.
Well, that's it for this week. Thanks for watching. Next week, it's Big Buck Night at the Island Resort and Casino, and more. Don't forget to add your deer season photos and stories to our Facebook page at facebook.com/realoutdoorstv. Good luck, hunters, and have a safe and successful deer season. I'll leave you with the sights and sounds of the Porcupine Mountains Little Carp River.